And the King, comforter, the Spirit, true intuitive, president, full of soul, famous treasure, blessings and giver of life, come and abide us and cleanse us from every impurity, and save our souls, O good.
So, tonight what we're going to do, we're just going to read through, this is a very short text. And I thought what we could do is talk about some of the interesting comparisons of the Book of Enoch with which are probably the main reason why the Jews excluded it. Anyway, so the Book of Giants. Let's see. I think there's an explanation here. It's only in. So, somebody want to read this text here?
It's small.
Yeah.
Print is small, but that's much better. I'll read, Ladika.
Okay.
The Book of the Giants was published in not less than 6 or 7 languages. From the original Syriac, the Greek and Middle Persian versions were made. The Sogdian edition was probably derived from the Middle Persian, the Uyghur from the Sogdian. There is no trace of a Parthian text. The book may have existed in Coptic. The presence of names such as Sam and Nariman in the Arabic version proves that it had been translated from the Middle Persian. To the few surviving fragments, texts A to G, I have added 2 excerpts, the more important of which probably derives from a Syriac epitome of the book. Naturally, Manichaean authors quoted the book frequently, but there is only one direct citation by a non-Manichaean writer, text O. With the exception of text O, all the passages referring to the Book of the Giants, texts J through T, go back to Syriac writings, apparently. They are therefore to be treated as quotations from the Syriac edition, that is, the Parthian text N, is not the product of a Parthian writer who might have employed a Parthian version of the book, but was translated from a Syriac treatise whose author cited the Syriac text. In their journey across Central Asia, the stories of the Book of the Giants were influenced by local traditions. Thus, the translation of Oya as Sam had in its train the introduction of myths appertaining to that Iranian hero. This explains the immortality of Saham, according to text 1. The country of Aryan Vezan, Aryana Veja, in text G, 26, is a similar innovation. The Kogman Mountains in text B may reflect the Mount Hermon. The progeny of the fallen angels was confined in 36 towns, text S. Owing to the introduction of the Mount Sumeru, this number was changed in Sogdiana to 32, text G 22. The Sumeru, this number was to 32 text. The heaven of Indra is situated between the 4 peaks, that is G21, of the Meru, and consists of 32 cities of Divas. I tell and B, Chinese Buddhism, 148, on Treyas Trimsat. These are difficult.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, let's look here. Trying to remember what Sogdian.
Hmm.
Huh. Okay. So that's interesting. Sogdia is an ancient Iranian civilization between Amudari and Sirdar in present-day
Hmm.
Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan.
Hmm.
Sogdiana was also a province of the Achaemenid Empire and listed on the Vedic inscription of Darius the Great. First conquered by Cyrus the Great, founder of Achaemenid Empire, and was annexed by the Macedonian ruler Alexander the Great in 328. Sogdian is an East Iranian language, no longer spoken. Um, huh. Sogdians also lived in Imperial China and rose to prominence in the military and government of the Chinese Tang dynasty. Sogdian merchants and diplomats traveled as far west as the Byzantine Empire. They played an essential part as middlemen in the Silk Road trade, while initially practicing the faiths of Zoroastrian, Manichaeism, and Buddhism, to a lesser extent, the Church of the East from West Asia. The gradual conversion to Islam among the Sogdians and their descendants began with the Muslim conquest. Sogdian conversion to Islam was virtually complete by the end of the Samanid Empire in 999, coinciding with the decline of the Sogdian language. Okay, so it appears that this Sogdia, which was the root of the um, was the root of Persian, but what strikes me there in that little passage is that much of this area that they were talking about belonged to the um, oops belonged to the area of the Church of the East, and since this is allegedly a Jewish Christian text, um, and I would assume Enoch also had a Sogdian it had Sogdian additions, um, and that it got and that they had a presence in the Tang dynasty in China. These were all areas that were missionized by the Church of the East, the so-called Nestorians. And because the Nestorians um, had no real did not have a canon of scripture per se, that I know of. Um, it's very possible that this was part of their canon of scriptures. So all these various languages that they're talking about um, were basically languages from Central Asia. Um, uh, the Uyghur, the Sogdian, the Parthian, from West Central Asia. Now, um, the so far as what the literature is saying, the Book of Giants was never part of any canon of Scripture. Enoch was, and remains in the Ethiopian Bible, but Book of Giants was not. And it's a in a sense it's a parallel text reflecting a lot of the material in the Book of Enoch. So this is a reconstructed summary of the Book of Giants. What's left, um, you can see, these are just they're little scraps that they were able to rescue from the from the ravages of history on manuscripts. So there is no full version. But basically, it's very much kind of in dialogue with the Book of Enoch. So anybody like to read?
It's difficult.
You want to go ahead?
Sure, glad to. The watchers are grieved over the sins of mankind and petition God to let them descend to the earth to teach the sons of men righteousness and to rebuke them. God grants their petition. Azazel is sent to prepare the way for the watchers. Azazel prepares the way, and the watchers descend, and they begin to teach them righteousness and justice. Enoch is chosen by the watchers to serve as a mediator between men and the watchers. The daughters of men lust after the attractive watchers and seduce them. Azazel, with Shemhazah's help, instigates the fall of the 200 watchers and their followers. The watchers fall from their glorious nature and become bound to fleshly bodies as a consequence of their joining sexually to flesh. They begin to reveal to their wives heavenly and earthly secrets. The watchers have their own families with humans and also with animals, and those that were defiled by them give birth to giants. These giants begin to grow to massive sizes and become full of greed and corruption. They kill many dragons, and the sons of Cain worship them for protecting them. The children of Cain are no longer able to sustain the giants with their offerings of vegetables and grain, so the giants turn on them and kill them and begin to eat them. The giants develop a taste for blood and begin eating any moving thing, including each other. The watchers teach some of the secrets they were appointed over to keep from the sons of men. The giants imitate the sins of their fathers and take for themselves wives and animal mates. And they beget Naphil and Elio. God, seeing all this wickedness, sends Enoch to declare to Shemhazah and the fallen watchers that they will soon be punished for causing the earth to be corrupted.
So just a couple of observations. You can see this is very much parallel to Enoch. It's kind of a retelling with a few twists. So initially, the watchers are grieved over mankind and petition God to send them to earth to teach and rebuke men. And God grants their petition. Azazel is the leader. Of course, it's presented quite differently in Enoch, where Azazel is the leader of the fallen angels. So, in a sense, this is providing a little backstory on Azazel. That he started out righteous and ended up as the chief of sinners. And Enoch is chosen by the watchers to serve as a mediator between men and them. I think that's pretty much the same. Now this is different. The daughters of men lust after the attractive watchers. Instead, it was the other way around. The watchers, the fall of the watchers was the result of their attraction to women. And here we're back to the Enoch's narrative. Azazel, with Shemhazah's help, instigates the fall of the 200 watchers and their followers. So remember that Azazel was the leader, and Shemhazah was also a leader, but Azazel received the blame for it, and he ends up bound before the others. And so the watchers fall from their glorious nature, from their angelic state of being, and become bound to fleshly bodies. So this is a classical uh, image of of the fall of divine beings um, becoming imprisoned in fleshly bodies. This is a story which uh, the Gnostics very much embraced. Um, uh, and and it was as a consequence of joining sexually to flesh. Of course, the Watchers' own nature, they were angels, um, but once they fell, they were permanently and forever bound to the flesh. Um, that's part of the uh, that's part of the dualism that's in these texts. And you know, apparently this is classified as a Gnostic text, but I think it's probably older than that. Um, so the Watchers have their own families with humans and also with animals. Um, and so if mating with humans wasn't bad enough, they also mated with animals, um, showing their unbridled lust. Um, but the fruit of those unions was giants. They grew to massive size and full of greed and corruption. They killed many dragons. Now the one of the commentators on this, actually at the end of this whole section, um, uh, asserts that the dragons were dinosaurs. Um, and here's also the allusion to Genesis, and the sons of Cain worshiped them for protecting them. Um, uh, but the children of Cain could no longer sustain the giants with their offerings of vegetables and grain. Remember, it was Cain's offering to God that got him cursed, um, or that had made him rejected by God. Abel was accepted by God, and so Cain slew him. Um, uh, but here the giants couldn't be sustained by a vegan diet, and so the giants turned on them and killed them and began to eat them. Taste for blood and eating any moving thing, including each other. Now, taste for blood, to a Jew, that's a very powerful thing because it's odious to eat blood in Judaism and in Old Hebrew religion. That's one of the four commandments of the Noachic covenant. The Watchers taught some of the secrets that were pointed over to keep from the sons of men. In other words, they had all of these various technologies, and they taught humans these technologies: metallurgy, weapons, cosmetics, all these very kind of material things. Um, and so from this union, the giants imitate the sins of their fathers, taking for themselves wives and animal mates. They beget Nephil and Elio. Nephil, probably the with the vowel changes, Nephil and Nephilim, it would be this. Nephilim would be the plural. Elio, I'm not sure. Um, it was like a demigod or something. Um, God sees all this wickedness and sends Enoch to declare to Shemjaza and the fallen watchers that they will soon be punished for causing the earth to be corrupted. Okay. So somebody want to read 4, 5, 6? Don't everybody volunteer at once.
I'll read.
Okay.
Chapter 4. Enoch is sent by the righteous watcher. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Enoch is sent by the righteous watchers to rebuke the fallen watchers, to declare to them their doom. He comes to Azazel first and condemns him as the principal sinner amongst the fallen watchers. He then summons Mahaweh to him and has him gather all the watchers for his message. Enoch enters into the assembly of the fallen watchers and gives them the message of doom. They weep and lament and beg Enoch to present to God their petition for mercy and a second chance to restore them to their former glory, and that their sons might have eternal life. They require a messenger to talk to God, because God has since stopped talking to them after their transgression. Enoch hears their case and tells them he will talk to God on their behalf. Oops, you got to put a little lower. There we go. Enoch, having written the petition of the fallen watchers and discussing it with God, receives a vision from God as a response. And Enoch writes for the vision for the fallen watchers in a book and gives the book to them. Enoch declares to them that they will not be forgiven, and describes to them his ascent into the presence of God, where he was given a message for them. Chapter 6. Enoch received from God an answer for the fallen watchers. He is told to tell them why they were not given permission to have sex, and what their punishment is because of it. And he foretells unto them the miserable doom and fate of the offspring of the fallen watchers, and foretells to them that they will become evil spirits and will not have eternal life, and that their years will be no more than 500. After hearing this, the fallen watchers and their giant sons take up stones to throw at Enoch, but the holy watchers shield Enoch from their deadly blows and lift Enoch up into the heavens to escape the earthly wrath against Enoch the messenger. This is perhaps the first time that anyone ever attempted to kill the messenger. Excuse me, my phone is ringing. I won't answer it. I'll just let it go. One more time. Forgive me. Okay.
There we go.
Let's go on to message. Where was I? I'll kill the messengers. This is perhaps the first time that anyone ever attempted to kill the messenger.
Which is kind of funny. So
Hey, Vadika,
yeah.
this combo. I was having issues with my mic earlier. I was trying to ask you a question about the previous chapter. What was it like? What's this like? Maybe the significance of why the fallen angels became fleshly body? Like that was like I just think that's interesting because they still have their abilities, don't they? Even though that they're in the flesh.
No, they're limited. And this is a kind of classic thing in Gnostic texts that as a result of the fall, because according to the Gnostics, human beings were created to be as pure spirits. But as a result of their fall, they were imprisoned in fleshly bodies and became mortal. So this is directly parallel to the Gnostic stories. Because at the time, in that form of the old religions, spirit, anything spiritual or noetic was good, and anything that was material or fleshly was evil. So,
and this is, and again, just to correct, like this is after Lucifer, correct?
Yes, there's the fall of Lucifer, which is distinct, from this. Then there's the fall of the Watchers. And one of the things that that where Enoch and, this text also, um, you notice that there's no story of Adam and Eve in the garden with the snake. In other words, what is the origin of evil? Well, in this text, it's the fall of the Watchers, the fall of Azazel, and the angels, um, uh, and also in Enoch, not without much emphasis on the story of Adam and Eve as the origin of evil.
I feel like a lot of people have this assumption that Lucifer was the leader of the fallen angels. Like I feel like non-Orthodox world, they have this understanding.
Well, I mean, in a sense, he did become the leader of the fallen angels, but his fall was before the fall of the Watchers.
Right.
Right.
But so my question is, did Lucifer get the same treatment as these other angels?
Yes.
Where he has a fleshly body as well.
Um, well, yeah, of a kind.
Okay.
But so he's imprisoned in materiality. He's imprisoned in this world.
In this physical world.
Right, and he will be bound. How you can't bind a spirit, but but the fallen watchers and are going to be essentially bound in hell, as is Lucifer.
And so again, I'm sorry, Madika. But because my understanding is if they have maybe Lucifer has a different a different case, but because I'm remembering the Book of Job where didn't Lucifer was able to go to the kingdom of heaven and ask God to be able to torment or to test Job.
Right.
So he was able to leave it, right? Or
Right.
to go to that realm.
It's a different theological context.
Okay.
Okay. So
All right. Thank you, Madika.
we need to what we need to do is we need to have the perspective that each of these is a thing in and of itself, and although it may have some relationship to like the Book of Job or which it does undoubtedly, and it's not, you can't necessarily equate the texts.
Thank you for explaining that, Madika.
Uh-huh. Okay. Um, so anyway, Enoch goes and he presents the petition of the fallen watchers to God, and God says that they will not be forgiven. And then he goes back to them to give them the message, and as it says, they weep and lament and beg Enoch, um, and so here we are. And so, having written the petition of the fallen watchers and discussing it with God, Enoch receives a vision from God as a response, and Enoch writes the vision for the fallen watchers in a book and gives the book to them, that saying that they will not be forgiven. And then he describes his ascent into the presence of God. Um, so uh, so it says Enoch received the vision. There's the answer. He's told to tell them why they were not given permission to have sex. And I presume that would be because they were immortal angelic beings. And that does not mix with uh, uh, with sexuality and fallenness. and their punishment and not only the doom and fate of the fallen watchers, but of their offspring as well, that they will become evil spirits and not have eternal life. Remember, having eternal life for their children was one of the petitions of the watchers to God, but they will have no more than 500 years. But then, even that is not it's not what happens, because they're set against themselves, and in order to the angels set them against one another to kill each other. So Enoch gets taken up into heaven um, to protect him against the wrath of the watchers, earthly watchers. 7, 8, and 9. Who wants any questions, comments?
I could continue reading if nobody else wants to.
Sure.
Hobabesh kidnaps another giant's wife and starts a war amongst the giants. When the war was ending, one of Oya's companions was killed by Mahaweh. Oya mourns with his father Shemhaza about his friend, and they curse Mahaweh. Mahaweh defends himself, appealing to the words of his father Barakel as justification. Hoya gets angry and attempts to kill Mahaweh, but Gilgamesh and the other giants prevent Oya from doing so, and they ward off Oya's murderous intentions. This is where we learn about Gilgamesh slaying dragons or dinosaurs and being a hero for the normal-sized men of that time.
So apparently I wonder if this tradition dates to the time of the composition of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was another 2,000 years before Christ. Okay, chapter 8.
Gilgamesh had a dream, Gilgamesh has a dream, but interprets it as indicating the giants will not be punished. The giants celebrate, but aren't entirely convinced, and subsequent to this, Oya and Haya have dreams of their own. They seek the interpretation of the dreams, but none of the giants can declare to them what the meaning of their dreams are. So the giants have Mahaweh go to Enoch in order to learn from him the meaning of the dreams and to learn what the fate of the giants will be. Mahaweh flies to Enoch, and Enoch greets Mahaweh, and Mahaweh explains why he came. And Enoch proceeds to give Mahaweh the answer, and he writes it down in a tablet and gives the second tablet as well to Mahaweh, intended for Shemhaza and the watchers, and he sends Mahaweh back to the giants with the 2 tablets. Chapter 9. Mahaweh flies back to the giants with the 2 tablets, and Mahaweh tells them of his journey to Enoch, and of Enoch saving his life, and tells them that Enoch had given him 2 tablets and revealed everything they had wanted to know from him. The first tablet is read. The giants discuss the contents of the first tablet after it is finished being read and realize they are doomed, and they lament over their miserable fate. They will have the second tablet read, Enoch tells Shemhaza that he and the other fallen watchers will soon be bound, but that the giants should repent and pray, for they still have a chance to benefit from reformation of their lives. Some hope.
Okay.
Chapter 8.
Chapter 8. Yeah. So Gilgamesh, interesting how he gets included in this. I half want to pronounce this. Oh yeah. And yeah.
Oh, that's pretty good. Oh, yeah, that's good.
Oh, yeah. Um, uh, so the Watchers are basically hoping they'll have get some reprieve, and and that God will change his mind, but it doesn't happen. So he gives Mahaway flies back to the giants with the 2 tablets, tells them his journey and of Enoch saving his life, and tells them that Enoch has given him 2 tablets and revealed everything they wanted to know from him. First tablet is read. The giants discuss the contents and realize that they're doomed, and they lament over their miserable fate. Then they have the second tablet read. Enoch tells Shamhaza that he and the other fallen watchers will soon be bound, but the giants should repent and pray, for they still have a chance to benefit from the reformation of their lives. Did you read this?
No, no. We'll
Okay.
start. Chapter 10.
Yeah.
Shemaza urges his 2 sons, Oyah and Hayah, to reform their lives in the hopes that they will yet be given mercy. Oyah and Hayah listen to the advice of Shemhazah and attempt to convince the giants to reform themselves, teaching them through Proverbs where true success is found. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. The giants seek to reform their lives. Enoch is sent to declare to the watchers that within 120 years they would all be bound in a dark prison of punishment for their sins, and that their sons would all be destroyed from off the face of the earth. Noah begins to build the ark. Around this time, only Azazel is bound. What does that mean, he's bound?
Remember in the Book of Enoch, it talks about places where the watchers would be imprisoned for bound and imprisoned. Yeah. And so we have this, we have this image in the in iconography of the harrowing of hell, where you have this figure, shadowy figure, bound and laying under the gates of hell, which Christ is standing on. So, and then later in the text, the other watchers, the other fallen watchers, are bound, and in Enoch they're cast into a dark and I think probably fiery prison. One of the valleys in the kingdom. So, you want to finish it off?
Sure. I think we have to do chapter 11.
Uh-huh.
Or did I do chapter 10?
Yeah.
I did chapter 10. Okay. The giants lament over Azazel being bound, and then they and the watchers, seeing that they were not bound or destroyed, excuse me, put my glasses on, vaunted themselves. When this happens, Gabriel, the archangel, was sent to incite the giants to commit civil war against themselves and their offspring, and they all began to kill each other. And the watchers beheld the destruction of their families. Lord have mercy. When the war of the giants ends with few survivors, all of the fallen watchers are subsequently bound by the angels into the dark prison of punishment. Chapter 12. Noah goes into the ark, and the flood comes and begins to kill all life, but not all the giants are killed by the flood. In order to fix this, Yahuwah, which is very interesting because it's very much like Yahweh, isn't it?
Well, it's just a form of Yahweh.
Okay. It sends the Leviathan, and the Leviathan begins to kill all the giants and their sons who survived. Oyah alone survives the attacks of the Leviathan and kills the Leviathan. The archangel Raphael is sent by Zehuah in order to punish Oyah for killing the Leviathan, and finally to restore to earth, to purity, Oyah. What did I do here? And to finally restore the earth to purity, Oya is killed and bound in the dark prison of punishment with the fallen watchers. The flood being over, and the giants and their sons still remaining on the earth without bodies, become evil spirits and are given a law by an angel of Yehovah how they are to live if they want to avoid being sent to the dark prison of punishment that the watchers were sent to. And this explains how the Nephilim came to be on the earth after the flood. You can almost believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is ancient mythology.
Yeah.
I, I don't think I need to go over this. Is all pretty self-explanatory.
You know, Vlateka, what really surprises me is how these documents survived.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I think those civilizations back then were much more civilized than we give them credit for.
I think you're right.
Yeah, when you have, they had technology of their own. They had all these various things, and I don't think that we really understand what they were like. So all of this is antediluvian. In other words, before the flood. And you would just have this last little bit saying that not all the giants and the watchers were killed. And so and so from them came the Nephilim. Now there's another text. And this is quite interesting. It's the history of the Book of Enoch, and the two of these were found together, and they were together in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so it talks about how it's quoted and why the Book of Enoch was never within the Jewish text, or the Jewish canon of the Old Testament. And it's interesting. This is Wikipedia. It says the main reason for Jewish rejection of the book is that it is inconsistent with the teachings of the Torah. From the standpoint of Rabbinic Judaism, the book is considered to be heretical. Now, you have to remember also that the Protestants adopted the Jewish standpoint, and so anything that is not in the Hebrew canon of the Masoretes is understood to be heretical. Now, why would that be? Where is it? So I think one of the things they really don't know when Enoch was written. The oldest manuscripts are from the Qumran Dead Sea Scrolls, and they're from 200 to 150 BC. It's almost undoubted that this book was already extant in the 3rd century BC. But one of the but there's a well, read this. Because of these findings, it was no longer possible to claim that the core of the Book of Enoch was composed in the wake of the Maccabean revolt as a reaction to Hellenization. Scholars thus had to look for the origins of the Qumranic sections of First Enoch in the previous historical period. and the comparison with traditional material of such a time showed that these sections do not draw exclusively on categories and ideas prominent in the Hebrew Bible. David Jackson speaks even of an Enochic Judaism from which the writers of Qumran scrolls were descended. Margaret Barker argues Enoch is the writing of a very conservative group whose roots go back to the time of the first temple. Now, so these are all areas where the Enoch material differs from the canonical scriptures. In other words, from the Jewish canon of the Old Testament. You know, the church simply adopted the Jewish canon. The Orthodox Church adopted the Masoretic text, which is, or not the Masoretic, the Septuagint. And Protestantism, when it created its version of Christianity, adopted the Masoretic text with the idea that the Rabbinic Judaism of 16th century Germany was the same as the Judaism of the time of Christ. Of course, they're totally different. So the idea that evil and impurity on earth originated as a result of angels that had intercourse with human women and were thus expelled from heaven. You know, here again, as we mentioned, this is so obviously a totally different narrative than Eve eating of the apple and giving it to Adam. The absence of references to terms of the Mosaic covenant, such as Shabbat, Sabbath, the rite of circumcision as found in the Torah. This is very interesting. There are many scholars who think that the Deuteronomic reform, which happened under Josiah around 600 BC, was actually the introduction not only of the book of Deuteronomy, but of the very concept of Moses and the covenant with Moses and that whole history of Moses. And that became the norm for Talmudic orthodoxy. And the Pentateuch was edited. They edited Moses in, which is interesting. Now, the observance of the Sabbath, or the rite of circumcision. Circumcision is not part of the law of Moses. It's from Abraham. The Sabbath, of course, is from the law of Moses, and found in the Pentateuch, the Torah. I'll get back to that. Concept of end of days as the time of final judgment that takes place. It takes the place of promised earthly rewards. Now, this is an interpretation, not even from the Pharisees, but from the Sadducees, who did not believe in the resurrection, who did not believe in a judgment. They did not believe in an afterlife, but only that they would get an earthly reward. I guess they probably made it into some kind of a, the Jewish idea that the Messiah will come to establish an earthly kingdom, as opposed to the heavenly kingdom. Of course, as the church, we reject that idea of an earthly kingdom. And this is one of the great temptations in Christianity. And you see all these Protestant sects thinking that they're going to have they'll be raptured, and then they'll reign with Christ in a kind of new earth for 1,000 years or something like that. Um, uh, as the Lord said, my kingdom is not of this world. The rejection of the second temple sacrifices considered impure. According to Enoch 89:73, the Jews, when they returned from the exile, reared up that tower, the temple, and began to again to place a table before the tower, but all the bread on it was polluted and not pure. So there are two aspects to this. What he's referring to was the showbread, where it was put on a table, a wooden table on one side of the door to the Holy of Holies, and then it was consecrated and put on a golden table, which was as holy as the Ark of the Covenant, and only the priests could eat from it. But it says here that, but all the bread on it was polluted and not pure. So what they're doing, and this very much reflects the theology of the Qumran community, which rejected the Second Temple, and they rejected the priesthood because they could not be chrismated, which was the key to the rite of ordination. So they were not real priests; they were just play acting.
Could you repeat that, Valdeka, please?
Yeah, I missed that as well. What was that last statement?
Yeah,
They were
the priesthood of the Second Temple, because with the first temple, when it was destroyed, the chrism was destroyed, and all of the furnishings of the Holy of Holies were gone. So the Holy of Holies of the Second Temple was empty, and so so the Second Temple was considered to have an illegitimate priesthood. There was not a now also the Essenes refused to even enter the city of Jerusalem because they thought that the entire thing had been made impure. They had these very strange, or well, to us, very strange laws about that it was unlawful and for anybody to have sex within within the city of Jerusalem, because as far as they were concerned, all of Jerusalem was the temple, not just the actual religious building, and so it was made impure. At Qumran, they also had a law, even about bodily functions, so that if you had so that the latrine was located over a mile from the monastery, the Qumran monastery, because it was impure. And so they had this very kind of radical halakha interpretation of the law, which was, could you imagine having to walk a mile to go to the bathroom? Because you would, because the whole complex would become impure. Sounds a little obsessive compulsive to me. Now this is Now, there's also the theory among scholars that the main sacrifice of the first temple was not animals, it was bread and wine.
Mm.
And we see that in um, uh, uh, the showbread. And it's interesting that they would focus on the showbread being impure, but not mention the animal sacrifices, which dominated the life of the Second Temple. So this is interesting. Um, they rejected um, Enoch on the basis that of how it's presented, how heaven is presented in the first 36 chapters, not in terms of the Jerusalem temple and its priests, which was the Jewish understanding, but modeling God and his angels as a court with its kings and courtiers. In other words, that the temple itself was an antitype of heaven, instead of just an antitype of the Jerusalem temple. Or rather, the Jerusalem temple being its type.
I guess Richard Dawkins would really enjoy this.
Oh, he probably would. Now, of course, as the Orthodox Church, we see the temple, especially the Christian temple, as modeling God and his angels as a court with kings and courtiers. In other words, you just look at the book of Revelation. You've got God enthroned with his Son and the Spirit, surrounded by the cherubim and the seraphim and the angels, all the angels and all the various ranks and the saints and those ministering to them. For us, for the first temple of Jerusalem, we have the same idea that the earthly temple is an antitype of the archetype of the temple of heaven, the temple not made by hands. But so far as the Sadducees go, the Jewish high priests, they didn't believe that there were angels and afterlife and all of this stuff. Everything was earthly. And so far as those who held to the religion of the first temple, they thought that the Jews were heretics, just like the Jews thought the Essenes were heretics. This is another important difference that was ushered in by the Deuteronomic reform. In the first temple, the calendar was a solar calendar with 12 months of 30 or 31 days. And what was adopted in the second temple was the lunar calendar. So calendar questions have been around for a long time. And you could say that the Essenes and the first temple were the old believers, or they were the synod of Hebrew religion, meaning the Rokor of Hebrew religion. And the lunar calendar, those were the ecumenists, modernists. So it makes a whole lot of difference because in the first temple, the feast days were always on the same day, and they were always on the same day of the week. So, because the solar calendar just repeated, and that it was um, uh, and so each day of the week has its own significance. Now that didn't really carry over so much. We have something like that in the Orthodox Church. Sunday is resurrection, Monday is angels, Tuesday is John the Baptist, Wednesday is the cross and Theotokos, Thursday is apostles and St. Nicholas, Friday is the cross and Theotokos, and Saturday is the martyrs and the departed. But think about it, if Christmas were to come every year, not only on December 25th, but also whether it was on a Sunday or a Wednesday, it would be always on that same day of the week, which made planning a little easier. Was trying to keep track of the Jewish calendar compared to the Western calendars is very difficult. So this final point was also one of the most significant points of difference, and St. Paul points it out, but actually the evangelists pointed out, between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, but also between the Jews and the Qumran community, or the community that accepted the Book of Enoch, who basically held to the religion of the First Temple. An interest in the angelic world. Well, the Sadducees completely rejected the existence of angels, and they rejected the idea of life after death. When you're dead, and that's it, period. And everything is just this worldly. So, and there's a lot of Jews that are still exactly like that. So what we have here is pretty much an indication of that the narrative that's in the scriptures was the narrative that was compiled by and shaped by the Deuteronomic reform, who rejected the religion of the First Temple. They also rejected kingship. They also rejected the very concept of God, because the concept of God of the First Temple was multi-personal, whereas the concept of God in the Second Temple is a kind of monotheistic Unitarianism. So God was just the solitary being, whereas in the First Temple, you essentially had a form of the Trinity. So all of these, and all of these are points, obviously, in the Book of Enoch, right? We all saw these, and so the Book of Enoch represents an alternative tradition to the Rabbinic Talmudic tradition of Judaism, that reflects the life and the theology and the liturgy of the First Temple, but not the Second. Which is why you have Jesus calling the scribes and the Pharisees, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, hypocrites. And has some, and brood of vipers, and has choice words for them. that basically, well, and in the book of Revelation, in one of the letters, Jesus is quoted as saying um, uh, uh, that they're the synagogue of Satan. So not very politically correct these days. But so Enoch, represents this alternative tradition to Judaism, and I think it's fairly clear that this is where that this is the root and foundation of where Christianity comes from. The teachings of Jesus reflecting much of the mindset that's in the Book of Enoch, and all of these key doctrines, because it's certainly different than Rabbinic Judaism. So,
Yeah, I was gonna make a comment on that. It might have been a little cheating. I was reading from one of the books I picked up there at the monastery from Margaret Baker. Uh, just kind of leading into Book of John, but in the very beginning of it, it's talking about a lot of these concepts you're talking about right now. That
right.
even within the apostles, you could, and particularly with John, you can distinguish the difference between Jews and Hebrews,
Yep.
and how they were using all of this to distinguish this, what ultimately what we consider to be, Judeo-Christian versus, somebody that comes more from the Hebrew tradition or the First Temple tradition,
Yeah.
and very interesting.
So Judeo-Christian is not an acceptable term.
Right, and she's pointing that out. I mean, this whole concept of the Second Temple and how, in the writings of John, and other apostles, that they're trying to make that distinction. Okay, that there is this kind of Second Temple group that really is the Jews, that and the kind of the First Temple seems to lean more towards the group that identified themselves as Hebrew, but not necessarily Jews.
Right. Well, the Jews were the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And our liturgical texts over the past week in particular, that's mentioned in the hymns almost every day.
Hmm.
Who the Jews were. And if you notice, I mean, Book of Acts, which largely deals with the conflict between the early church and the Jews, those issues are not even mentioned in the Book of Hebrews. So they're dealing with a different group. And so I would say, that certainly the Book of Enoch and maybe the Book of Giants um, come from that Hebrew context and not from Judaism. Judaism is that religion that was created by the Jews who were in exile in Babylon.
It kind of leads into another interesting thing that I'm sort of beginning to recognize, and as soon as I said it, I could feel it slipping from my old mind. Give me a second, it'll come back. Sorry.
I just want to say that's okay. We all do it.
Uh-huh.
Senior moments.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember now. So how these there's this significant difference when we look at the concept of the fall and how evil entered the world via the Book of Enoch versus the Book of Genesis. And there has to be some way to kind of meld these together or separate them from what we see in the New Testament. And one of the things that I think has always been appealing, particularly with the Book of Enoch, and I think why we were all kind of saying, yeah, let's read the Book of Enoch before we had begun it, as we were ending the Book of Revelation, was the fact that it was held in to some esteem in the early church, and also there are quotations from it, like in the Book of Jude and other places.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is or maybe it's already been answered, but how this all kind of knits together. Do we exclude the concepts of what happened in Genesis and look at it more towards the Watchers in the Book of Enoch, or is there some parallelism that is occurring here? How do they kind of separate this and 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 uh, and and uh, allow these to kind of coexist? Ultimately, the Book of Genesis was canonized by the Orthodox versus the Book of Enoch becoming, less so.
Right. And I think and part of that is um, that the Orthodox Church accepted the Jewish Old Testament, but not the Hebrew version, the Greek translation, because they didn't trust the Hebrew version. And the Gospels themselves point out, that there were many areas of profound disagreement between Jesus and the Pharisees and Sadducees. It's really interesting to analyze some of those passages. You're going to, and we'll do that with the Gospel of John.
Mm.
Because I think to a great degree, John was written to the Hebrews. It wasn't written to Jews.
Mm.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. I mean, I'm seeing that as well.
Whereas Matthew and Mark and Luke, to some degree, were written to the Jews. But also Matthew in particular to the Jews, but actually Mark and Luke probably more to the converts, the Gentile converts. Whereas John was written to the Hebrews. And the issues the issues between those books are very different that they address. So
Still kind of trying to put my, understand the mindset of the first century Christians, and how do you accept the LXX and the that in that particular canonized context, and still hold on to the Book of Enoch. How would the first century mindset reconcile those two descriptions of how evil enters into the world?
well, there was no there was no canon at the time. Even the Jews didn't have actually a canon of the Old Testament at that time. That happened later, around 110, and then that developed. But the Christian canon, there was no canon. There were lists of books that were accepted by certain synods of bishops. But that wasn't even fully reconciled until 396. So the liturgy that we use, either St. Basil or St. John Chrysostom, existed before the canon of the New Testament. In other words, most of the formation of the church took place before the canon of the New Testament. And that, that's just historical. That doesn't mean that people didn't read all these books, but they read all sorts of things.
Right.
And some were deemed to be acceptable, and some were deemed not acceptable. And then there was a kind of intermediate group of, well, interesting historical books, but they're not going to make them essential. I would suggest that Enoch would fall into that category, but the Book of Giants would fall into the third category of distance from the church.
Was there a, and just kind of throwing this out from some of my more recent readings, was there kind of sort of another level in terms of a set of books that were considered to be important for the more learned scholarly, type versus the average person, of which I thought Enoch was part of that.
No. Liturgy tomorrow? What's that? No, I'm not going anywhere. Liturgy about tomorrow. Yeah. Bye. What time? I'm not going anywhere tomorrow. Okay. Sorry. John, could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, I thought that there was also kind of sort of a level of books that Enoch fell into, that was a group of books that they considered to be kind of like a must read, or not part of the canon, and not necessarily part of these more spurious books, but something that that was reserved for the more learned and person that was able to discern better.
Well, as I said, there was no canon. So, there was this commonly accepted group of books which had a great authority, not given them by the church yet as canonical, but as generally accepted by the church as appropriate scripture. Then there were these secondary books, which in a modern language we would call apocryphal, and Enoch would be part of that. And then there were groups called pseudepigrapha, false writings. So the like the Gnostic books, probably Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Mary Magdalene, all that kind of stuff, would be in the pseudepigrapha, which are also mostly heretical books. Then the kind of Judeo-canonical books, it's to the Jews who invented this system. You had the Hebrew as the kind of core books with authority. Then they had Deuterocanonical books, and that's where we get that status for the Wisdom of Solomon and the book and the Maccabees and all of that kind of stuff. And at that time, Enoch would have been read as part of the Old Testament, just like it is in the Ethiopian canon. So, for example, we have the book of the Proto-Evangelion of James. Now, the ancient fathers certainly gave it, looked on it as with great authority. But it was, and and we have all of our material on the Theotokos from that book, more than anything else, actually, because it's got, I mean, it's basically all about her. But it was never, that I know of, was never part of the canon. But it wasn't pseudepigraphal. It was books for the wise, to use the category from Esdras, second Esdras. So so people had to sort it out for themselves. What did they, and they would look to their bishop, who was the pastor. Each parish, each community had a bishop, and the bishop was the pastor. The presbyters, the priests, were just the parish council, essentially. But the bishop would be the one they would go to with any kind of questions, including which books to read.
Hey, Vadika. So, so you were saying that during the writing of the canons or of the Bible, was the Second Temple, were they the ones that were deciding that?
No, the Second Temple was had long been destroyed before the Jews began to gather first in Jamnia, I think it was, and then they ended up a little bit further north than that. And then at first the Jews were expelled from Jerusalem, but then they were expelled from the Holy Land altogether. But the rabbis were, began to make decisions by the year 110 as to their scriptures. They resented that the Christians were using their scriptures.
Oh, okay. Because it seems like how you're explaining it, like the Book of Enoch is glorifying the first temple, and it's more supporting, Christianity. And I'm just trying to understand potentially why it's not in. It's like it's not in this in the Old Testament that we have today.
Weird. It's because it's weird.
Okay.
Right? And it is weird.
Yeah, but it's a little odd, but I mean, it still sounds like it rings a little true, though.
Yeah, it does. And so it's still floating around, obviously.
If I could add to that question just a little bit, maybe with a comment, is a little bit of what you were saying, Vladika, and that is there was no Old Testament canon at the time of the apostles.
Right.
I mean, we're thinking of it from a modern standpoint as to why wasn't the Book of Enoch included in the Old Testament. So at the time of the apostles, they were quoting from it, but there was no solid canon at that time. It was a book among books, but something inspired them to quote from Enoch, just like they would have quoted anything else out of other writings from the Old Testament. At least that's how I'm seeing it. We're looking at it from our perspective after canons were done, but from their perspective, there was nothing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big problems for Christians looking at Judaism is that we tend to um, read our own uh, like we want to make the Mosaic covenant about salvation. It has nothing to do with salvation. So anyway, Mosaic covenant was about how do you live in this world. And part of that is because one of the major parties that formed Rabbinic Judaism didn't believe there was an afterlife. So, but you can see the roots of Christianity in much of this.
Absolutely.
So, so it's 9 o'clock, so probably should close off.
So, one last quick question related to this whole book and series. Are we is there going to be further discussion about this giants at next week or
No,
okay?
this is the end of this segment on Enoch, and the Book of Giants is just a kind of an appendix.
Okay.
So there was something really cool there in the Book of Giants. Let's see.
You're talking about the pictures and everything else that the
Yeah.
kind of that's the part I was alluding to was is there going to be any discussion about all those findings of large creatures?
Are you saying they've actually found skeletal remains of large creatures?
Uh-huh.
That's what the whole last dozen or two pages were showing actual artifacts and discoveries of what are like giants.
Where?
Yeah.
Where?
Well, if this image that's on the screen, it's on page 150 of the
I don't have the book.
of the PDF.
Oh, the PDF. I don't think I have. No, I don't have that PDF. I might have gotten it and it just went by me.
Okay, but so this is a comparison of skeletons that they've found. This is a normal human today, 6 foot tall.
Okay, I can't see it on the screen. What I'm seeing is.
Yeah, still have the words up.
Oops! Now you're gone.
Okay, can you see this?
Hang on, let me try to get you back. Yeah, no, I can't see that either.
Huh.
Wait, I don't even see you at this point. I got to find you. There we go. Okay, I've got you back, but you got the Qumran, the page with Margaret Barker and the First Temple and Shabbat and circumcision.
Okay.
That's what's on the screen.
Okay.
Now there you are.
There I am.
And I'll come back.
How's that?
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Must have missed it.
So they found a 15-foot tall skeleton in Turkey in the late 50s. 1950s. Maximus of Thrace, one of the Roman Caesars, from 205 to 238, was 8'6".
Wow.
Goliath was 10'6". Og, the king of Bashan, was 12 feet. They found somebody who was 19 feet 6 inches in 1577 under an overturned oak tree in Lucerne. Another skeleton 23 feet tall in France in 1456. A near complete skeleton was found in 1613, 25.5 feet tall in France. And then the Carthaginians in 650 something BC uncovered the skeleton of someone who was 36 feet tall.
Unbelievable.
Compare that with a modern, typical 6 foot tall modern man.
Yeah. I mean, someone 15 feet tall would be truly a giant.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think there was one other example in there that was 42 feet.
Yeah.
Truly giant. Yeah, there we go.
During the Cretan War, a massive skeleton was found.
But none of these are extant today, right?
Well, they were. Let's see.
I mean, they're in the allegorical historical record.
Well, it's the allegorical historical record, but one of the things that's interesting is they found all over North America giants. I mean, these huge skeletons buried in Indian mounds.
Really?
Yeah, and
Oh,
the Smithsonian went and bought most of those skeletons, and then they disappeared.
Doesn't fit with evolutionary theory, so
No, it doesn't.
they had to hide those.
Then there was a mummy they found in San Diego, which was 8'4". So there's the picture.
Mike, and that's a real mummy that they found? Where did
Yeah.
they find this? This is fascinating.
In San Diego.
Mm.
It would have been basically desiccated and buried, but
Mm.
That's astounding.
Incredible.
let's see what else do they have.
Why isn't this more widely known?
Well,
Indeed.
it is actually. But there's actually a lot of videos about it on YouTube, and and there's stories about it, the giants and things, and who knows? Maybe Bigfoot is one of these giants,
Maybe.
unless it's one of the Watchers.
Then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Vladika,
Yes.
is that from the document that we have already, the PDF, or was
Yeah.
that? Okay, I just
Yeah,
haven't had a chance to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I don't think there's any of these roaming around South Carolina, though. So
Hey, Vladika, so it's like science is catching up with what we already knew. Like they're trying to without using with the absence of God as their definition. But I mean, there's when they're crossbreeding animals like the liger, it's like a male lion and then a female tiger. And when you do that, it completely like negates it goes over the growth hormone. So it just keeps growing and growing when you crossbreed those species together. And it's really large. Like if you look into it, it's really interesting.
yeah. I've looked at that a little bit, and they're rather striking looking animals. But I mean, people have been crossbreeding animals forever. That's where mules come from.
But mules are sterile, so we can't make new creatures. Only God can do that.
Well, you do that by what is it, a horse and a donkey or something like that?
Right. But mules are sterile. They can't produce more mules.
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
Right.
So God is not mocked.
Yeah.
But what do you think about all the people that they say that the people that were descendant from the Watchers have 6 fingers and all that kind of deformity, 6 fingers and toes, and that's happened, and they say that's a sign that you're Nephilim blood, and also like Barron Trump being 7 feet tall. I mean, all these extraordinarily tall people.
Well, that's just the upper range of normal. That's not that's not considered giantism, 7 feet. And you get, you have, I don't know how, I don't think it goes much above 7 feet, but but I think they're talking about something much larger. And who knows, who knows what all this was really about. I certainly don't.
Thank you.
All right. So, and besides, I thought this would be kind of fun.
Oh, yes.
It was fun. Thank you, Valdika, for doing this.
So you can get yourself
Yes.
in all sorts of trouble with antique texts. Can't take it all as gospel, shall we say?
Right, right.
Okay, so shall we pray, or did we already?
No, we didn't yet. I don't think we did.
Shine, shine in New Jerusalem, the glory of the Lord is shown on thee. Exult and be glad, be radiant, O most pure, thou tokest in the resurrection of thy Son. Christ, great and holy Paschal, wisdom, word, and power of God, grant that we ever more perfectly may partake of thee in the never-ending day of thy kingdom. The blessing of the Lord be upon you through his grace and love for mankind, always now and ever and into ages of ages.